You don't have a discipline problem. If you did, failure would be consistent, but it isn't. You follow through when the task is low stakes and you can maintain the standard when you're the only one in the room. The collapse only happens when the work begins to matter, when the stakes rise and the potential for being seen increases. You aren't lacking discipline, you're defaulting to a survival version of yourself that cannot coexist with your next level of performance. This is how the pattern actually functions. You start with momentum, the action matches the objective, and for a while, the output is consistent. But then something shifts. Not because the task got harder or the goal stopped mattering. The task hasn't changed, but you slow down and the reasons start to multiply. You suddenly need more preparation. The timing isn't quite right, and you tell yourself you'll start properly once something else settles. And the thing that was actually moving you forward quietly stops. Most people will look at that pattern and diagnose effort. They tell themselves they need more discipline or a better system. But notice when the pattern actually appears. It's not when the work is hard, it's when the work is about to become visible. And this is the part nobody talks about. You're not failing to follow through. You're following a different instruction. One that decided somewhere underneath the intention that being seen completing this carried a cost that you were not ready to pay. That's not a discipline problem. That is a different mechanism entirely. And that mechanism is not what most people think it is. When the stakes rise, your nervous system doesn't register opportunity. It registers threat. Not because something is wrong with you, because the version of you that learned to operate under pressure was built in an environment where visibility, judgment, and exposure carried a cost. That version learned one thing very well: stay small enough to stay safe. And the problem is, that version is still running. When the work becomes visible and the outcome starts to carry weight, the older identity activates. And it doesn't negotiate. It recognizes your behavior around one priority: protection. Not performance, not the goal, protection. That's why the reason to wait suddenly makes sense. It's why the preparation never quite feels complete, and why you can want something genuinely and still find yourself moving away from it. The behavior is not irrational, it is completely logical for an identity that was built to survive a different set of conditions. The label that you've been using, whether that's procrastination, perfectionism, or fear, is describing the symptom. What is underneath it is an identity that has not yet been updated to match where you're trying to go. And this is not isolated to one area. It's a baseline response, and it triggers everywhere the stakes rise. The polishing that never ends is not a quality standard. It's a way of staying hidden without having to admit that that's what you're doing. The more you refine, the longer you can justify not being seen. The waiting is the same thing. You're not waiting for the right moment, you're waiting until visibility feels safe, which means you're waiting for a condition that the survival identity will never agree has been met. Every week that passes is not neutral. It's borrowed time you're paying back with interest on your own credibility. And it shows in your standards too. When the pressure is low, your standards are clear. But the moment a situation carries real weight, the boundary softens, you drop the standard, and the conflict is traded for comfort. You'll tell yourself that you're being measured, but what you're actually doing is choosing a temporary reduction in pressure over the identity you say you want to build. So it's not a follow-through problem, it's a visibility threshold. And the survival identity will defend that threshold every single time until you decide the cost of staying small is higher than the cost of being seen. And this is where traditional personal development work stops working for you. Not because the insight or the teaching of it is wrong, because insight and behavior change are not the same thing. And the personal development industry has been selling them as if they are. You've probably already had the breakthrough, the moment where it all clicked, where you could see the pattern clearly. You could name it, trace it back, and understand exactly why it was there. And maybe even for a short while, something shifted. But then pressure returned and the behaviour returned with it. And then you were back where you started. Except now you also feel like you should have known better. That isn't a failure of understanding. It's what happens when the operating identity hasn't changed. Knowing the pattern doesn't update it. The survival identity does not respond to awareness. It responds to evidence, repeated, behavioural, under pressure evidence that a different standard is now in charge. So a breakthrough isn't proof, it's recognition. And recognition without new behaviour is just a more articulate version of the same problem. Awareness starts the process, but it doesn't finish it. So where does change actually happen? Not in the realization, not in the decision to be different. It's in the behaviour that follows when pressure is real and the old version of you shows up. The identity doesn't update because you understand something. It updates because you acted differently at the exact point where you previously wouldn't have. It's not a mindset shift. It's evidence. And evidence is the only currency the survival identity recognizes as a reason to stand down. It doesn't require a dramatic life overhaul. It requires precision. Identifying the specific moment the default activates and doing something different right there. And it doesn't mean you have to do it perfectly or even permanently from the first attempt, but consistently enough that the behaviour starts to build a case for a different standard. You can't think your way out of this pattern. You have to prove your way out of it. Small, deliberate, under pressure actions that demonstrate that the new identity is capable of leading when it counts. So your new direction is not more awareness and it's not more planning. It's behavioural evidence accumulated at the exact moments that the survival identity would usually take over, not before the pressure, inside of the pressure. If this exposed a pattern you've been ignoring, subscribe because this is where we do the work. And if you're ready to stop negotiating with a version of you that stays small, I've built a 10-day protocol called Break the Survival Code. Most people have a realization and then immediately go back to performing the same identity using better words. They change the vocabulary, but they don't change the default. This protocol is designed to interrupt that process. It's 10 days of specific under pressure prompts and an identity tracker designed to do one thing: provide your system with the evidence it needs to stand down. It's not about clarity, it's about installation. So if you're interested, the link is in the description. And if you're not starting the protocol today, your only job now is to watch for the moment your default activates tomorrow. Don't negotiate with it, just notice the cost. I'm Jay Black, and I'm here to help you close the gap between who you say you are and what you actually do. I'll see you in the next one.